here today, the goal is for, Jake, uh, for you to share your story, as well as, we have the founders here of his Breast Cancer Association, Harvey and Vicky. We want to make this a collaborative conversation to talk about male breast cancer and understand the stigma around it, the differences of treatments, and how your experience differed from Harvey's experience, which were years apart, and the lack of someone would say expertise or guidance or emotional connection in someone who is going through male breast cancer, which has a stigma to it, as we all know. So I think the most important thing for us to do here is really let's take a few minutes to start with Harvey and Vicky. Let's have you guys go over your backgrounds quickly. You're just how you discover your diagnosis, the story, and then what inspired you to launch, his breast cancer, your nonprofit, and then, uh, why don't we each take, a couple minutes to do that? Harvey and Vicky, you guys go, and then Jake will open it up to you too as well.
Okay, well,
Who's first? She went first. You were first, so you go first.
um, I'll begin by saying that, Harvey and I, as brother and sister, our mother was diagnosed in her late 70s. She had a sister that was also diagnosed with breast cancer. So we knew there was a family history along with a couple brothers who had passed away in their early 40s of cancer. Um, so when our mother was diagnosed, I at 37 went for a mammogram and unfortunately was diagnosed with DCIS. So 1 month after our mom, and then had lumpectomy and kind of moved on thinking I'm in my 30s and I don't have to really think about this for a while. And unfortunately, at 39, I had a second diagnosis, not a recurrence, different makeup, different background, but same breast. Again, 37, 39, thought, do I really have to worry about this until I'm in my 70s? Just had a lumpectomy. I live a kind of healthier lifestyle, healthier mindset, and this isn't something I should really have to be thinking about. Unfortunately, at 48, I was diagnosed for a third time, a little bit more invasive. Went through more invasive treatments, 6 weeks of radiation, went on hormone blocking medication for 5 years, and really thought, I'm doing all the right things. My doctor recommended I see an oncologist to determine whether chemotherapy was going to be part of the program. And while I was at that office at University of Pennsylvania, I picked up a pamphlet on genetic testing, something that was really just coming to the forefront at that time. And thought, no, this is something I think I want to know more about. We seem to have a family history, and what does that really mean for me? And if not for me, my children and, future at that point, future grandchildren. So I went ahead and had genetic testing completed, found out I carry the BRCA2 genetic mutation, putting me at a higher risk, of course, for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic melanomas, just to name a few. So I shared that with my brothers. I have two older brothers, and Harvey, thought breast cancer, and we weren't even thinking the prostate cancer part of it. I went and had a full hysterectomy just to, reduce my risk of a recurrence. Um, and about a year and a half later, Harvey noticed something and he'll share his story, but it's what we've then found out to be, we have a genetic mutation that's throughout our family, men, and we are a family of two brothers. I have three sons. Harvey has two sons, and it was something that, was passed down from our mother, but can easily be passed down from, your father to a son or daughter. I did go ahead and I did have a fourth diagnosis of breast cancer, invasive. 10 years after that, when I was 58, at that point, I had a double mastectomy. I did need chemotherapy. I'm still on an aromatase inhibitor to block any of the estrogen, and continue to do scans and testing to whatever extent that I can for the BRCA part of it, having pancreatic MRIs and colonoscopies and seeing my dermatologist, et cetera. So just something that, we have to be more aware of in our family. But Harvey's diagnosis came off a little bit after my third diagnosis, and more about, learning more about the BRCA2 mutation.
Harvey, why don't you tell us about your story too, and then how you guys came to form his breast cancer too as well.
Okay, so Vicky, after her third diagnosis, she learned about genetic testing. She followed through the genetic testing and alerted myself and our brother Jeff, the oldest of the three of us, that she was carrying this BRCA2 mutation, and we could be carrying it as well. It's 50-50 likelihood. And I was like most guys, and I said, okay, I'm not going to get breast cancer. I'm a guy. You can get pancreatic cancer from it, you can get prostate cancer from it, you can get melanoma. And it's like, okay, I'm already being actually seen about a higher PSA. So I kind of put that in the back of my mind, and I alerted my urologist. The interim, I was just like, okay, well, I'm not going to get breast cancer. And then a couple months later, I was with a bunch of guys, and one of them I hadn't seen in a while, gave me a big bear hug. And when he hugged me, I got a pain that shot from my left nipple, like somebody stuck a knife in my chest and went straight up into my ear. I said, okay, that's not normal. So when I got back, I did notice, and like most guys, I just tossed it aside, that my left nipple had been indented for a little bit. And I thought it was just because I was a little bit out of shape and it was folding over, the skin was folding over. Came to find out later that was a telltale sign. Went back, saw a primary, told my wife, she said, you're always looking for something, go see a doctor. I went to see my primary a couple days later. She took about 10 minutes to do a quick digital exam of my breast and sent me for a mammogram, which I didn't even know at the time guys could get mammograms. Everything went into full speed there, ultrasound, full biopsy of my left breast, and obviously came back as cancerous. I kind of knew right away because of Vicky's history and our family history that I was probably in trouble with it. I made sure I found the best breast cancer surgeon I could find in the Rochester, New York area, which is where I was living at the time. Had a full left mastectomy. I was offered a bilateral mastectomy. I didn't take it at the time. Probably retrospectively, I would have if I know then what I know now. 18 months later, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer as well, also caused by the BRCA2 mutation. So I've had double barrels there, but Vicky and I decided to join forces and do something about it, because when I went through treatment and surgery and follow-up, the system was not set up for guys. It was pink gowns. It was hide you in getting a mammogram because there were too many women walking around with a breast sticking out. You might see one, God forbid. So I just said it was just so emasculating. It was so difficult. The forms were difficult. Everything about it was difficult. And Vicky and I just said, between us, we have 5 boys, and each one of those boys is now 50-50 to carry. So we got to do something to change this. We got to make it easier for the next guy. And we decided to form this foundation and fully 501(c) nonprofit to try and educate and help other guys either going through it or not knowing that they can get it, which seems to be the biggest problem, which has been most of our advocacy work, trying to alert and educate people that this can happen to you. It's also much more deadly as a guy because we're not screening properly. So we try and teach you how to do that and to screen properly and what to look for and to know your family genetics. His was formed because his happens to be my full initials, HIS. It was an easy moniker for us to go with, and it talks to the guys. Male breast cancer, who knows that? His breast cancer, it's your breast cancer. So that's what we've done for the last, what is it now? 12 years?
Almost
13 years?
15 almost.
15 years? Yeah, well, 16 since I've been diagnosed, so 15 years that we've been doing this. And it's amazing. Every time we help some other person, we can educate them, we can help their families, we bring some comfort, we bring some education to them. They thank us for it, and that's all the pay we need. That's the rewarding part of what we're doing. And now we have an online Facebook group that keeps growing by the minute. It seems like every day there's like 3 more people asking to join our group where they can talk to each other. So we're not talking to clinicians, we're not talking to nurses, we're not talking to doctors, we're talking amongst each other, and that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah. So it seems like, your focus isn't really on um, the research and the finding the next cure and stuff like that. You're solely focused on getting the word out there. We've said this again and again, but men don't know they can get breast cancer. And, we're going to talk to Jake in a second, who, Harvey, your diagnosis was 16 years ago. You started a nonprofit 15 years ago. And it still seems like even all the research and stuff that all the awareness and facts and information that you guys are putting out there, there's still so much to do. Jake, talk about how, your journey was, what it was like for you to go through this too as well. And then would love to hear about your time frame around when you were diagnosed and stuff like that.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. So I just crossed over my 2-year mark. I was diagnosed in August of 23, and I
So,
was an
so about 13 years after Harvey's first diagnosis here.
correct. And I used to say I was stage 2 and then moved to stage 3 and then moved to stage 4. And I now realize that was a mistake in me saying that, right? I think I was misdiagnosed with stage 2, and I was then stage 3 and then metastasized to stage 4 and metastasized in my hip. So mine was stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma, so not genetic, but ER positive. Estrogen positive. We want to make sure that we're using all the terms properly. So I have an estrogen positive tumors. And I had several in my armpit, in my axilla region, and then a couple behind my nipple. And so my path was supposed to be pretty easy. I was told by my oncologist pretty early on that I had the run of the mill breast cancer, right? I had what everybody gets, right? You do your time in chemo, you do your time in surgery, you do time in radiation, and then a year later, you're sort of done, right? And he said, you're going to be fine. And that's not how it went. And I think that's not how it goes for a lot of people. I think that when you're expecting a linear path, most of the time it is not. And I think just even talking to Vicky about, not diagnosis after diagnosis after diagnosis, that talk about a nonlinear path. I mean, mine was all within the same diagnosis and it was nonlinear. So I did chemo initially, 16 weeks. 4 weeks on the Red Devil and then 12 weeks on Taxol. And then after that, I went for my mastectomy, and they didn't get clear margins the first time. So they got in, and then 10 days later, I found myself back in surgery, which was hard. And it was, I'm thinking I'm done now. I'm moving on to radiation, and here I am back in surgery. And when I went back in for surgery, we got it. Everybody was happy and we're good. When I was doing my radiation planning, my radiation oncologist was like, "Hey, I'm finding some weird things on your scans. I don't think they got everything." So they went in and they discovered 3 more tumors. And at that point, I was with a previous care team, and I went into them and I said, "Look, you guys are not capable of finding and excising tumors very well." And so I moved to Dana-Farber, and that's where I am now. Dana-Farber so I've been with them for about a year, and they did my radiation and everything else. And so I'm working with the male breast cancer department at Dana-Farber, and Dr. Leone is the head of that department, right? So it's great that they have a specialty, right? They've only got a handful of guys, but there's a specialty department for male breast cancer at Dana-Farber. So talking about the emasculation, sure, there's a lot of things. I mean, I'm a pretty well-adjusted guy. I mean, I'm pretty open to a lot of things. And even I felt like, oh my gosh, I mean, the pink waiting rooms are still there. There's still a lot of flowers. I tell this story a lot that when I woke up from my mastectomy, they did not have a bind on me, a surgical bind that sort of keeps everything in place for a couple of weeks until you take everything off. They didn't put the bind on me. And the nurses, and I want to be clear, the nurses were looking out for me. They weren't being unkind. They were looking out for me. But they said to me, "Hey, we didn't put the bind on you because the only ones we had in the surgery suite were pink and had flowers on." And I'm like, do you think that I'm not going to accept a medical device that I need because it has flowers on it? I said, of course I want it. Put it on me. And so, but that's the mentality, right? There's people, everything that's being delivered for, all the doctors and nurses and all the clinics have pink and flowers and all these things. So they're like, and some of them are trying to do the right thing. Some of them don't see the issue. Some of them are like, listen, suck it up. And I say yes. And there's a lot of conversations about, yeah, well, guys should just, lose the toxic masculinity and all that stuff. And yes, I agree that probably should be a thing, but it's a way easier thing to just paint your waiting room green. Like that's the way easier solution than to get rid of 3,000 years of toxic masculinity as a species, right? So let's paint the waiting rooms green and then deal with all the other stuff later. So, my advocacy started pretty basic. It was just with my friends and family saying, "Hey, do you guys know that you can get, that guys can get breast cancer?" And I was like, how is this going to go? And we started, telling our friends and family, and, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to start a TikTok channel. I already had a TikTok, but it was really at that time making love letters for my wife, if that's what, it really was. It was just I'm a filmmaker and a movie guy at heart. And I just started making little movies. And then I was like, well, let me try to use TikTok what it's intended to be used for, which is spreading word. And so I started doing it, and we have grown and grown and grown. And I was a marketer. I'm a marketer by trade. And so basically I took 30 years of marketing and 20 years of working in social media and turned it around on my own personal brands. And that's how we've grown to the place where we are now, where we're 31,000 people on TikTok and 8,000 on Instagram. And again, it's not; those are small, microscopic numbers as compared to, I'm going to put real influencers out there. But in the cancer world, talking to 30,000 people is a significant number, right? Especially when you're talking about male breast cancer. And my core audience is likely, I would think it's 92 to 93% women aged 35 to 54. If I was talking to the male breast cancer audience, that number would be infinitesimal, right? And so I'm talking to just anybody that will listen that, hey, guys can get breast cancer. And a lot of times what I'm doing is informing the women in their lives that, hey, you may want to check your men and, or you just might want to be mindful. You just remind your guy that so a lot
Jake,
of times
I'm going to interrupt here just for a second.
Sure.
I just interrupt because I know Harvey had some comments that he wanted to bring into, and I want to make sure that we're allowing for some back and forth conversation too. So, it's crazy to me, the stigma around the pink and all of that. When Harvey was going through it, I'm sure that was, his feelings and his thought process too. Harvey, was there something you wanted to comment on?
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much about the pink and the masculinity, because I think that topic we keep banging on it and we've worn it out. And we have made, Dick and I have worked to implement change. We've changed the forms where there's actually male forms when you go for your mammogram. Now, there used to not even be a form for male, so you had to answer questions like, were you, what time was your menstrual cycle? Where were you in the month? Things that, are you pregnant? There were things on that kind of form. So we've changed some of that stuff just by adding some blue, and Vicky's worked very hard to add the blue to it. What I wanted to touch on, what Jake was getting on, is it was more on the medical side, because the obsession that the clinicians in our medical system has with guys in this world is it's no big deal. We're going to treat you just like a woman because there's so many cases of female breast cancer. It's not the same. There's thousands, 10,000s of permutations of women's breast cancer, and just adding men to it doesn't create a straight chalkboard of this. You got to do this, and then you got to do A and B and C and follow through. It's not linear, as Jake referred to. I had the same problem, Jake. My surgeon told me, no big deal. We're gonna take out the tumor. You're gonna get up and you're gonna maybe take a pill for the next 5 years, which found out to be tamoxifen, the hormone inhibitor. But I didn't know that much about it at the time, so I just said sure. And then I got up and found out, and then I got the oncotype score, and then I found out I got to visit an oncologist. And the oncologist they sent me to was a general oncologist. Didn't know anything, wasn't even specific to breast cancer, let alone male breast cancer. So my point is that you can't just assume everything the medical world tells you, and you have to be cautious. You have to go in with open eyes and question everything. I wrote a blog for our site at one time called "You Can Fire Your Doctor." Just because you have a doctor doesn't mean it's the best doctor for you. And I'm sure they're doing everything possible, and they think they're doing everything possible for you, and they're using their best opinion and not trying to hurt you. But it might not be the right opinion or the right treatment for you. Jake had chemo. I had chemo. I ended up having chemo, which I never expected going into surgery. It blew my mind that I had to have chemo. And when they came out and they said, you got to have this kind of chemo, and this was now with a breast oncologist, I said, well, what are my other options? And then I found out the real world's out there. Go see other oncologists, get other opinions, find out what they're offering, tell them to show you the proof, show them the studies, give you something to work with. And then you make your own decisions. You can most people get cancer, it's a diagnosis, it hits you over the head, and you go, okay, my doctor's smart, I'm not, I'm just going to do whatever he tells me. But that's not it. It's now your life. If your doctor makes a mistake and you die, he moves to the next patient, she moves to the next patient. You get one shot at this, so you better make sure that every decision you make is right. And when Jake was talking about that, it hit me back about, my surgeon, and he's a really great surgeon. He's a really good guy, telling me, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about this. And honestly, you're not always fine. And I've lived with it for the last 16 years with testing and follow-ups and all those things. I am not metastasized there. I have had prostate cancer issues that have other issues. But just in general, just follow your own education. You have a full-time job. This is your next most important job, the most important job you're ever going to have in the world. You better learn what you're doing with it.
And Jake, what made you look into your cancer? I don't think we ever heard that. I think you started off with saying what it was, but what was that point in your life that was like, something's different?
Well, I think what Vicky was saying when she was like, well, I'm young, right? I was 51 when I was diagnosed. So even, not as young as Vicky, but I was young and I had lost 100 pounds. I used to be almost 300 pounds and I had done all this mental and emotional work over 2 years. And so I felt like I was in a pretty good place. And then 2023 rolls around. And I feel this lump in my armpit. And I'm like, well, that's weird. But I'm not going to think that it's anything because why would I? Because again, young girls, when they're in health class in 7th grade, are taught if you find a lump, tell somebody, mom, dad, doctor, whoever, tell somebody if you find a lump. Boys are never taught this, that if you find a lump to go and find somebody. Not that, finding a lump, but I thought it was going to be a cyst or anything else. And so when I went to my primary care physician and he said, yeah, I mean, that's probably a cyst. He named off like 10 other things that it could be. And not one of them was breast cancer. And he said, but you should go get checked out. And we did, and then we got biopsied, and that's when it came back as positive.
Well, it's a good thing that your doctor at least, gave you that opportunity to go and get tested because unfortunately, so often men come in and they think they feel something and the doctor kind of brushes it off and says, no, it's nothing. And well, we'll check it in 6 months or I'll see you in a year. And, unfortunately with men, that is often the case and why it is so often diagnosed when it's much further progressed and more fatal. Nobody's looking. And then when you do ask, it's nothing. And until it's something, you know. And I remember when Harvey was going through his treatments and his chemo treatments, at one point we were talking about how, you're treating you like a female. They came in and said, we want to give you this injection. And he questioned it and even had them call his doctor and ask and inquire, why are you going to give me this injection? Are you sure it's something I need? And they came back in the room, 10 minutes later and said, yeah, we spoke to their office and you should have this. And when he got home that night, he got a phone call that said, yeah, we weren't supposed to give that to you. We give it to all the women. It won't hurt you, but you didn't need
Yeah.
it, you know?
I remember it well. I remember fighting it. I remember giving in. And I remember the call from my oncologist that night and apologizing for it. And it wasn't that big a deal. It was actually a bone density drug, and it was it Luna? It wasn't Lunesta. It's something with an L, but it was a bone density drug that they give all the women, but they don't use. They never give it to men, but they didn't. They never see men, so they just gave it to me because that was normal protocol.
Which they
And it,
probably should give to men, for bone
yeah,
density, especially a
but
hormone when you're depleting all the hormones. It's no different. It
yeah,
affects the bones. So,
but that's
We
part of the system, and that's part of the problem is they didn't. Hopefully, they're better now, Jake, in your time. But in my time, there were so many questions. That was such a rarity at the time. Go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, so we've heard about your stories, how you guys were diagnosed. It's interesting, right? 20 years ago, I would say that all the women, or 30 years ago, even maybe 40 years ago, right? All these women get breast cancer and they start their organizations to start to spread awareness because it's starting to become more and more popular, right? Two men get breast cancer, and, again, no one, both of you shot 10, 15 years apart. And, his has done so much educational information. Jake, did you when you were going through it, did you have anything where were you getting your information from to support you? Um,
Well, I did. I think what I did was what most guys do. We start Googling, right? And I found the three male breast cancer organizations that are out there, the three major ones, and I, and they provided, in some capacity, provided me resources. At least just getting in there and realizing that I'm not alone, right? So going on joining Facebook groups has its, you know, there are some that are really good, and then the majority are insane, to put it lightly. And so finding the right community is good. But I've, over the past 6 months, I've been exploring more and more advocacy. And these women that started breast cancer organizations maybe 30, 40 years ago that have been in this fight for a really long time, there's almost a resistance to men to be involved in that fight. I've been told straight up that I was told to my face, men have too much voice in this world. I'm not letting you take away mine. I'm
um,
like, I'm like, listen, Greta, I'm not trying to take away your voice. I'm literally just trying to make mine hurt. I'm not trying to diminish yours in any way. So there are people out there that have breast cancer that still don't want men's voice in there because I think it dilutes the overall problem. Again, I don't necessarily care what they think. My breast cancer, my mastectomy scar, no, that doesn't go away just because you don't think I belong in your club. So, finding the people that want to work with me, that want to work with us, and there's so many breast cancer organizations out there that I'm not going to have a problem finding people that want to work with us.
Jake, when we started his breast cancer awareness, I mean, we developed it because, like you, we were Googling it, 2 in the morning, and there was zero information out there at that time. There was no way for us to get any information on what it is to be a man with breast cancer. The best we could find is what it was for a man who's, to support his spouse or girlfriend that was diagnosed. And we compare breast cancer, to what it was like for women in the 50s or 60s, where it was very hush hush and nobody really spoke about it because let's face it, there are men. We can go back decades that were diagnosed with breast cancer and nobody knew that because they didn't want to talk about it, the stigma that went with it. So, it's very hush hush. It was pushed under the table, and we felt we needed that voice to be heard, that male side of it, and help educate. But we approached several organizations like you, and we were shot down. Our focus is on women. Well, why can't it be women and men? Why can't you just add two words into your sentences and say, and men? It's that simple when you're talking about breast cancer. So years later, decades later now, because, say over 15 years now, interesting to see some of the organizations that turned us down now have a tab on their website. They're providing some information, maybe still not their focus, but they've at least come around, some of them. And we've been fortunate to work with a couple wonderful organizations like Force, who's were really instrumental in guiding us and helping us to get started, get our organization underway, and wanted to get this information shared and let other men know that they are not alone. And that's what our focus is always.
I think that's a good point. I mean, Harvey, Vicky, you started his breast cancer organization. What are some of the biggest achievements that you guys are most proud of from this organization over the last 15 years?
People like Jake find us now where they couldn't find us before. We can actually be visible to the guys that are looking, in a lot of cases, it's the wives or the girlfriends or the spouses of the guys, because the guys are, look, the problem with the guys with breast cancer is they're diagnosed late because we're guys and we don't like to go to doctors and we ignore symptoms. Like Jake said, his doctor said, oh, it's probably just a cyst under your arm. It's not a big deal. But we found a real problem with the clinicians. So I think the biggest thing, I would say our biggest accomplishment is teaching the clinicians that the doctors and nurses. I can't tell you how many times, almost every time I go for a screening, which is a lot. I screen a lot of stuff. And the nurse who's starting my IV and she's looking at my chart and she goes, wow, you've had breast cancer? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I didn't know men could get breast cancer. And these are the nurses in the room that are starting your IV, that are doing the prep work. It's just, but I think it's gotten better. It's gotten better and better. And as Vicky said, we had trouble. Jake said the same thing. We had trouble with people. We had major organizations that didn't want to recognize the fact that guys had it. And that's why our colors are pink and blue, because we add a touch of blue, the male side of the pink. People don't even know why breast cancer is pink. And Vicky and I know it because we met with the people that started the pink. But it's just adding that blue. It's become such a pink place in the world that we've added it and we've changed it. And there are more guys. And I'll keep talking till my very last breath. I'm sure Jake's going to say the same thing because this is our life's goal now. We're going to educate as many people as we can. We're going to save as many guys as we can. And I think that's the biggest accomplishment. I don't know that you can pinpoint, maybe Vicky can come up with a different answer, one thing, because it's been so many things across our foundation and the people that we've touched.
I agree, Harvey. I mean, I think that we've had so many roots in different areas that have, helped to see us grow and develop in so many different ways. And obviously the hereditary cancer side of it and the way that has developed feels like every 6 months there's a new genetic mutation being discovered. So many people, women, men that say, my mother, my grandmother, I had breast, I had ovarian, and they can't find a mutation, but it's out there. It just hasn't been discovered yet. So I think some of those improvements have been pretty amazing to see how the breast cancer world and hereditary cancer world has evolved over the past 15 years. I think for us, if I have to pinpoint certain things that I am very proud of our accomplishments, we were part of a wonderful documentary, very informative documentary called Pink and Blue, Colors of Hereditary Cancer. We were in it, our mother, and it talks about families, young girls, a girl who's doing, as a provider, having a preventive mastectomy or a preventive hysterectomy because her mother passed from ovarian cancer or breast cancer at a young age, and she doesn't want to be in that same situation. And the stories that are shared in this documentary are just very moving. It's educational. You laugh, you cry. So I'm very proud of the work that we've been a part of with pink and blue. And also I'm proud of Harvey for writing a wonderful book. He put his story, his feelings, showing that he's just an average guy growing up, I'll say a bad boy, in the teenage years in the 60s and 70s. And just like anybody else, this can be you. This can happen to you, with or without the
Jake,
hereditary part.
Jake, how about you? How has your, life changed after sort of your, I don't want to say changed after your cancer, but
Sure,
like how has your story changed? What's your mission change, right? You're on this
sure.
same path to spread awareness. So talk about what you've been doing and how you've been,
Mhm.
using your voice and your story here to help educate.
Well, I think my, having only been really doing this in this capacity for less than a year, but in that year, um, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation reached out to me and their social media manager, because of, I'm on social media. And we started a conversation that led into a whole lot of things. One of which they wanted me to sort of run through their website and sort of tell them where they could be more inclusive. They're aware that they're not as inclusive as they should be, but they wanted to know where they could. And so as I was going through their site, one of the pages I came across, which hits me because I'm a veteran, was the military women veterans breast cancer program or something like that. And as I read down it, it talks about how many women are in the military, how many men are in the military, how many women veterans there are, how many men veterans there are. And I got to the end and I said, well, none of this applies to me, even though I have breast cancer and I'm a veteran. So I wrote to them and the senior vice president of programming, he wrote me back and he said, it took me about 10 minutes to go on that page and realize that we were completely wrong. And within 6 weeks, they not only changed the name of the program, they made all the language inclusive on their site and then started promoting it to military men. So, like, that's the kind of change. So, it was the first time I affected real change, right? Somebody went on their site and they were like, "Wow, we are not talking to the right audience," especially because if you're talking to the military, there's 14 million veterans out there. There's only 2 million women veterans. So the likelihood, especially because breast cancer is more prevalent in military veterans than it is in the general population. So therefore, if you have that 14 million population, you should be talking to them. And most guys, if they come across the military women's breast cancer program, they're just going to self-select out of that, right? I'm not any of those things. I don't have breast cancer. I'm not a woman. I'm a veteran. So, now that it's more inclusive, right, from the title all the way on down and the language, it's not just and men. They have a whole section about male breast cancer and why that's important to be looking for and all that stuff. So affecting change in organizations is something I'm hoping to do. And like we've all said, with the organizations that want to change and that see that they need to change, right? There's a lot of them that will do that, and there's some that are not going to. And I get that. I'm never going to be the one holding up that banner saying "and men," right? And yes, I was in a conference, 5 days of they were talking about women and all these things, and yes, I could have raised my hand at any moment and said "and men." I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I'm going to raise my hand and ask pertinent questions about male biology or gender or whatever when they're important. But just raising my hand and doing that at the time didn't seem right. So it's almost like picking and choosing my battles, right? Where do I want to put my energy? Where do I think my energy is going to be most effective? I'm a disruptor by nature. And so if somebody doesn't want to be disrupted or somebody is not willing to even accept me because of my gender, okay, I'll move on to the next because there's a lot of organizations that will.
Right. So, I mean, we've heard so much great like insights here into, how you guys are both helping everyone, how your journeys have come to be, so many similar stories and, um, nuggets of information here that really, depend on each other, right? And so I think, as we think about the sort of conversation here. I mean, Jake, what has impressed you like about Vicky and Harvey's story, their journeys, their whatever it may be here that you find, most impressive?
Two words. It's tenacity and um and I don't know what the other word is, but it's something to the effect of you're in this for the long haul, right? And you are tenacious in your mission. I love that you guys have been doing this not only for as long as you have, but have been successful as you could be, and getting out there and pushing this agenda. I think that's the most important thing. I think all of us could go out there and yell and tell 30 people today that guys can get breast cancer. And, 29 of them are going to turn around and go, "Hell, what? What are you talking about?" So it's not like any of us are doing such a good job that everybody knows. We all need to keep on pounding that pavement. We all need to keep on saying it every day. I do 2 TikToks a day generally, and both of them generally have something to do with male breast cancer. And those are new audiences that come and find me every day. So I love what you guys have been. You guys have just been beating that drum for 15 years, and it allows me to come along 15 years later and me have an easier path, right? I'm not starting at 0. Maybe I'm starting at 10, right? And you guys had to start at 0. I'm starting here, and I'm laying groundwork that another guy 15 years from here, he's going to get it, and he's going to be like, "Oh, thank God that Jake did." And I'm going to point to you guys and the organizations that have been doing this for a while and saying, "Well, they laid the groundwork for me, and then I laid the groundwork for you, and you need to lay the groundwork for somebody else." Because that's the only way this gets better. We're never going to have that huge network of people like the female breast cancer. We're never going to have that. So the most we can ask for, I think, is all of us being as vocal and as loud as we possibly can.
I think we started below 0. Actually, we were so
Probably.
down. Nobody wanted to talk to us. We didn't exist. We weren't even a speck of somebody's thought process. It was just so far. It was so difficult early on. You know, if you can, like I initiated before, if you start with the medical system and you teach them, I don't know why it's not. I'd love to get involved in some medical school and how they program their classes, because I don't think they cover this in any kind of depth. It's just maybe it's a passing by moment. It's I went for a checkup a few months ago at a very exclusive, I won't mention them, cancer hospital in Southern California, and there was a fellow. She was a fellow. She had just graduated. She was doing her rotations, and it just happened to be in this area. And she was doing the pre-work for the doctor who was coming, for the oncologist who was coming in behind her. And we spent about 30 minutes, and she looked at me and she goes, after we're done, she goes, "I think I learned more in this 30 minutes than I learned in all my years of medical school just from talking to you." And it wasn't just about breast cancer, because I've had prostate cancer too, and this was more about that. But she had no clue, and she just got out of medical school and was doing her fellowship rotations. So I think the biggest problem, I never know what the biggest problem, because every day it seems like another thing's the biggest problem. You mentioned the military. The biggest problem for us with guys has always been the guy, the macho. And you can't get much more macho than the military, right? And they don't want to acknowledge this stuff. They're going to go into a building and take a chance of being shot in the head. They're not worrying about breast cancer. But yet, after ground zero, there was this huge cluster of male breast cancer that came out. Now, I know about it. I'm sure you know about it, Jake. Vicky knows about it. Our inside scoop people know about it. I don't think the world knows about it. I don't think they ever publicized what went on with that. Just that story alone, what's the fallout from ground zero and how many male breast cancer cases were recorded from that area of ground zero, which were the firemen, the policemen, whoever else could get in. There was the Coast Guard, because they came in from the ocean side. Nobody ever heard that story. So we have so much work to do. There's so much more to be told. And if we could start with the bigger picture and get everybody else educated, start with the medical system, get them educated, then maybe it'll trickle down. We tell guys all the time, you go for your annual physical, and your doctor, your guy, and the doctor does everything he's supposed to do. He does a digital exam of your prostate, he sends you on your way. Do they ever ask you to do a physical exam of your breast. But if you ask them, they do, because every woman that comes in for a physical, they will do a physical exam of her breast. They will do a digital exam. They'll check her. Guys don't. And we tell guys all the time, Vicky and I, we bang our heads with this stuff. You go for your exam, it'll take another minute. Just ask the doctor and go, oh, yeah, I can do that for you. Just have them check your breasts. Go to our website. We'll teach you how to do it yourself. But the doctor's obviously more proficient at it. But, you know, all that little stuff adds up to so much that we can just get the bigger picture out there. So we're going to keep doing it. You're going to keep doing it, Jake. We're gonna keep pounding at it. But all these things, there's so many places we could go. There's so many tentacles that we could follow on this, and we're just three people, you, me, and Vicky here, but we can't do it all. But we got to keep trying to spread it as much as we can.
Perfect. I think this is a great closing place. I think for me, this is so insightful, right? I have grown up hearing this from both Harvey, who is my uncle, and Vicky, who is my mom. And, I think it's crazy to me. I say this all the time, but I'm shocked at the people that I speak to who are my age. Not that they don't know that they can't get breast cancer, especially the men, right? It's more about the hereditary side of things that I think really concern me. And I say this, I'm like, if you know your family has a risk of high cholesterol, if you know your family has a risk of high blood pressure, why don't you know that your family has a cancer in it, right? It's a gene that is, causing you and could kill you, just like those other things. And so I think the work that you guys are all doing is so important. Please don't stop. Continue to spread the message, not just for male breast cancer, but I think just in cancer in general and the genetic side of things. I know, Jake, that isn't really your focus, but I think as you talk about it, I think there's an importance there too as well.
100%. I will tell people one of the first things I ask if somebody comes on my page and says, "Hey, I have a lump," and I'm saying, "Well, have you been tested for genetic testing?" I mean, even though I'm not, it's one of the first things I ask people.
Right.
And then if they are or not, I'm like, "Well, listen, the next thing you need to do is go see your primary care physician." I'm not dispensing any medical device. I'm just saying, hey, you need to go get checked out. That's the end all and be all of my advocacy. But you're right. Harvey is exactly right. I think the lack of medical education, the fact that oncologist told me I was going to be fine in 10 months and I had the run-of-the-mill breast cancer, right? And that was an oncologist, telling me that. And multiple, I mean, I'm right with Harvey. I mean, every time not so much at Dana-Farber, right? But at other places, when I see somebody, they're like, wait, you have breast cancer? These are trained doctors. These are trained nurses with 25, 30 years experience. And they're like, wait, you have breast cancer? So yeah, I agree. The word has to get out more. And all we can do is keep on yelling it.